everyone, this is HiFi Home Theater. I'm your host Brian. Thanks for stopping by. Today's video is going to be a comparison of two amplifiers that I've had the opportunity to have in my setup for several months each. Both these amplifiers are offered from monoprice.com, their Monolith brand. One is going to be the newer Class D M8125x, which is an 8-channel amplifier rated at 100 watts per channel. And the other one is going to be one they've had around for a while, and that's the 7X Class AB amplifier, and that's 7 channels rated at 200 watts per channel, both in the 8 ohms. This isn't meant to be a deep dive into either one of these amplifiers. There's plenty of reviews on the 7X out there already. I know there's not as much on the 8125X because it's newer and hasn't been out as long, but I want to keep the video down and just give you what I feel is the best information I have to help you make a good purchase decision. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I had both these amplifiers in my system. Both of them were powering my 7 bed layer speakers. If you're not familiar with those, they're the Arndell 1723S setup. Did a review on them. I'll put a link to them, to that review up here in the corner there. Check it out if you haven't already. These are all 4 ohm speakers with pretty much average sensitivity, just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with. They are capable of reference levels. They're THX certified, but they do need a good amount of power to get there. So I consider them a pretty good test for amplifiers. So getting into both of these amplifiers, like I said, they're both good candidates to power your bed layer speakers. They're both about the same price. The M8125X is listed at about $2,000. But has free shipping, whereas the 7X is usually around $1,850, but doesn't usually have free shipping. So if you factor shipping in there, they're pretty much the same price for either one of these amplifiers. Dimensions wise, the 8125X is a bit smaller and lighter than the 7X. The 8125X weighs under 30 pounds, whereas the 7X weighs a whopping 93 pounds. So there's a big difference there. The front of the amplifiers are pretty much identical, except the 7X is slightly taller than the 8125. They both have a nice brushed aluminum, kind of 3D chiseled looking front plate on them, with their the amplifier name on the front with the Monolith logo, and just underneath that you've got the power button. It's a pretty bright blue LED, and unfortunately you can't dim that or turn that off. Swinging around the back, both of these have XLR inputs, which is really cool. The 8125X only has XLR inputs, it doesn't have an RCA option. So you're either going to have a preamp with XLR outputs or use an RCA to XLR cable. Whereas the 7X, you can use either one. You can use RCA to RCA or XLR, doesn't matter. Just make sure you've got the switch set on the back to whatever cable you plan on using. If you're shopping for cables for either one of these amplifiers, I will have Amazon affiliate links for both of them down in the description. Continuing on with the back panel, both of them have one power socket for your power cord. Both of them have a grounding lug and a 12 volt trigger input to turn them on and off remotely from your AVR or receiver. Continuing on the back of these amplifiers, we'll talk about the binding posts. Both of them have perfectly fine binding posts. They're very well built. The 8125s are a little bit nicer looking, whereas the 7Xs are a little more industrial, but they both work just fine. I would give the slight nod. I do to the 8125X. I do prefer those binding posts, but like I said, the 7X, those binding posts are just fine. Now, the case material is going to be a little bit different between the two of them, actually. So the 7X has got your standard flat black, pretty thick, heavy gauge steel, which works perfectly fine. But one thing that surprised me with the 8125 is that it actually has a more powder coated feel to it, and the heat sinks are actually connected directly to the case itself. So the whole 8125 package, when you pull it out of the box, it just feels very well put together, very solid. Not to take anything away from the 7X, it doesn't feel flimsy or anything, but just the way the 8125X is built and that powder coated feeling to it just gives a little bit more of a better fit and finish feel to the 8125 than the 7X. Both very well built amplifiers, but like I said, slight nod in fit and finish and feel to the 8125. On to the power ratings. With the 8125 is rated full bandwidth, 100 watts per channel into 8 ohms, and 175 watts per channel into 4 ohms. The 7X is rated full bandwidth, 200 watts into 8 ohms, and 300 watts into 4 ohms. Now, both of these amplifiers are rated very conservatively. Monolith always rates their gear conservatively, which I appreciate. But one thing, if you look at especially the input voltage and the distortion levels they're rated at, the 8125 is rated with a little less input voltage required and at a little bit lower distortion than the 7X. So on paper, the 7X does look a little bit more powerful, but you wouldn't be expecting a huge difference from these two amplifiers. But one thing you don't see on these spec sheets is the difference in dynamic headroom we have. And generally just a Class D against Class AB kind of thing. Whereas Class D, its rated RMS power is usually pretty close to its dynamic power. And Class AB, a lot of times can have differing amounts of headroom included in dynamic power. And that's really where these two amplifiers differ the most performance-wise, is that what you see power-wise on paper for the 8125 is pretty much what you get, whereas the dynamic headroom of the 7X is much greater. If you scroll down on the specs of the 8125, you get into how Hypex actually rates their modules as a more kind of peak performance. And you can see that we can get 250 watts into 4 ohms at 1 kilohertz and 1% total distortion. But Audioholics actually tested the 2-channel version of the 7X, which I expect to perform similarly, and it was hitting over 520 watts and 4 ohms at 1 kilohertz with 1% THD. So that right there is actually more than a doubling of power. And that's where these two amplifiers really separate themselves from each other. So what did that mean for me in real use? For me, that meant that with my speaker setup and using the 8125, I could get to about 5 under reference level with clean output without hearing any kind of nastiness, distortion, or compression. I could hit -5 from reference cleanly with the 8125. Whereas when I put the 7X into my system, I could hit reference level cleanly. So, I mean, really a difference of 3 to 5 dB, and I think it really comes down to that dynamic headroom. So we're talking about the difference of being just under reference cleanly and hitting reference cleanly. And I think that's really where the dynamic headroom of the 7X comes into play. Now, if you never hit even 5 under reference, you listen to normal levels of under 10 or 15 under reference, then this won't be an issue. You probably won't notice this difference. But if you like to crank it up a little bit like I do, the extra headroom does come in handy. Or if you have more efficient speakers than I have, let's say you've got something like a Power Sound Audio or a JTR where you're in the mid-90s to even 100 dB sensitivity, you would hit reference level with the 8125 from my seating distance very easily. Yeah, like I said, in my setup with my pretty standard sensitivity speakers, I could get to under 5. I can get to 5 under reference cleanly with the 8125, but if I wanted to push it beyond that to reference level, I really needed the 7X. Just one thing to keep in mind when you're shopping Class D amplifiers against Class B amplifiers is that difference in dynamic headroom, that the advantage that the Class AB amplifier is going to have. It does make a difference on dynamic material. Now let's talk about the sound signature or quality of both of these amplifiers. I'll say up front that I am actually biased towards usually Class D amplifiers. I am a big fan of Hypex, especially their Encore offerings. I've built several of them myself. I've used them in several of my setups. Big fan of just clean, zero distortion sound. You can tell I'm not a big fan of tubes, right? I want clean, transparent, neutral sound, and that's what I'm used to Class D giving me. So when I put the 7X in my system, I was absolutely ready to take it right back out and sell it if I got any of that warm sound signature that some people like, but I don't care for. And that's not what I got at all. The 7X is probably the most neutral sounding Class AB amplifier that I have owned. And I can tell you, if you're staying within the performance capabilities of both these amplifiers, I am not confident. I have zero confidence at all that I would be able to pick the two out of a double blind test. Is there a difference between the two of them? You know what? It's probably psychological, but maybe a slight difference. But here's the thing: if you put me in a double blind test, I probably couldn't. Not only could I not tell you which amplifier was which, but I could not tell you which one I could prefer either. So take that for what it's worth. Both of these sound extremely neutral, extremely clean. Like I said, if anything, I'm biased towards Class D, and if I got any hint of distortion out of the 7X, I'm more than willing to put it on the market and go up in power to the bigger Class D offering from Monolith to get the headroom that I needed. But I didn't. I kept the 7X. So my final thoughts on these two amplifiers. If you're shopping around and looking at both of these together, first I would say I would look at your sensitivity of your speakers and what your SPL requirements are going to be. If you have high efficiency speakers, like I said, like a JTR or something like that, you'll probably be just fine with the 8125X. But if you have a setup like me with pretty normal sensitivity or average sensitivity speakers, and you do like to push things a little bit, you'll probably be more happy with the headroom that the 7X is going to give you. Now, keep in mind, the other differences and compromises you're making is the 8125X is much lighter, much more efficient and cooler running than the 7X. I mean, the 8125 is small, runs cool, and weighs under 30 pounds, where the 7X is this big 93-pound behemoth that puts out, it doesn't get super hot, but it puts out a decent amount of heat. So if you're looking at both of these amplifiers, like I said, look at your SPL requirements, and if it's my money and you can deal with the size and weight of the 7X, I think that's the choice. That's the choice I went with. So that's the one I would recommend. I think to get the performance that the 7X gives you and also get that lightweight and cool running, you're going to have to go up to the $3,000 offering on the Class D offering for Monolith in order to get kind of the best of both worlds there. The pros for both of these amplifiers are going to be their price to performance ratio. It's kind of untouchable for other offerings in the market right now. Monolith is really putting out a great product for a great price. They're both very well built, great price, and great power output, very neutral sound, very low distortion. As far as cons on the 7X side, obviously size and weight. For the 8125, I think the only con I could think of is XLR inputs only. There were some people experiencing some buzzing, that I read on the forums from the 8125. I did not experience any of that. Both of these amplifiers were dead silent on my setup, so I didn't experience that. Okay, so that's going to wrap up my comparison of these two amplifiers. I hope you guys found this helpful. I'm going to have affiliate links down there for both these amplifiers along with the cables used with them. If you use my affiliate link, a small percentage of your purchase does go towards the channel. It doesn't cost you anything, but it's greatly appreciated. Also, if you appreciate this content, you found it helpful, please hit that subscribe button down there. Hit the bell notification to know when my next video drops. Very close to the 2,000 subscriber mark so far. So thank you everybody out there. As always, I'd love to hear your feedback down in the comments below. If you have any questions, I do try to read all the comments and eventually get to any questions you might have below. And I want to thank you again for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Take care.